plug in.
Oh, there we go. That's my
By the way,
adapter.
we're not letting you use HDMI. We'll hide the cables because they.
Just remove them from the table.
Yeah, I know. You can't have them use
Is somebody fixing something that was already working?
Yes.
Right.
All right, good.
And I'm helping.
Oh my God.
What?
Here's the adapter. I should have a MacBook.
It was working.
Here's a brand new unused one. Apparently, I still have the maybe. Or maybe I put the cat back on that.
Thank you very much.
So I'm make sure you do the signal before I leave off, and then I gotta go downstairs to make sure it's stable. Good to go.
That's a DVI, not VGA.
What?
That's a DVI. The cable VGA.
Alright, you have a. That is a. We can try it. Grab that one. Generally speaking, I don't have a whole lot of luck. Me and this playboard is generally more reliable. That's HDMI, but we can. Oh, shit! Someone grab that. Try that and see if it works. Yeah, this DVI shit. You have a VGA mini display port?
Oh, I have a mini display that went to HDMI.
Yeah, that's this one, yeah.
That won't work.
You can't capture that because we split off one thing. That's why I told him to get rid of the HDMI off the table, otherwise it just confuse people that try to hook up to it and it doesn't kill them.
But I'm going to say
Needs power, doesn't it, as well?
I choose not to help. One less pair of hands is a good thing.
I have a bag.
Plenty of seats up here behind me.
There's a full row just here, yeah.
Yeah, I got front seat. That's what I'm talking about. This is way better than taking shit.
Yeah, I was thinking about that one too. Yeah, I'll go with you.
Oh, well, we're waiting on you. You're not going to
Take a shower.
Yeah, no, that's good. You were waiting on us.
I don't care.
Is it yours?
Yeah, it is. Where did you see that furnace?
That's the kind of question you ought to be asking at a security conference.
Let me see the back of it. Yeah, that's right.
Even more worried now.
It was on top of your box.
Security conference. Where's mine? I always do that in cons.
I do that everywhere I go. I do Keith's phone.
No, I don't do that on my wallet. My wallet, but it's the phone.
Hey, you're from, not know before, you're from,
Security awareness.
yeah. I went to your birthday party.
You were my party?
Yeah, I
Oh,
was
cool.
in the
Yeah. Yeah, that was fun. Just the back away.
Yeah, that's all.
Everything worked before Adrian came in. Then he came in and now he's gone and nothing's working.
Nothing works.
To be fair, we are all
Hey, look. I've seen it.
Yeah, you're getting it.
They're not. Well, how's now?
Wow. shitload of snow on top of all that. There's a vendor in Archonka, and it's an anal snow cone with an LED. She went straight with the
The video. Right, this Connor.
Richard's on now.
This Connor.
I'm not going to take that.
It's radiating like all the
Anal plug, get a multi or whatever that, they're giving out anal plugs. What? Yeah, if you go to
Well, the anal plug always says, hey,
it's
I'm
got
going
it's a snow cone anal plug with an LED.
Okay, I saw the snow cone, but I didn't go into the sex toy, so.
It was quite, I mean, just being recommending, no, the trials will be in jeopardy for whoever loses.
Are you getting that?
Okay, I guess you got it, everything looks good.
All right, we go.
Cool.
All right, hi, good morning, good afternoon, something. Anybody, let's start with a chant. Equifax sucks. All right, this session, I really want this to be interactive. It's going to be geeky, and the premise of it is the internet's broken. We all know it. Shit's broken, and something's got to be done. So for 17 years, I've been working on a crazy idea of how to fix the internet. And yeah, I know. It's whatever. I know. You call, no, your job is to call us out on our bullshit.
You mean shut it down?
Fix like a puppy that you fix?
The anal plugs are out there. So, in the process of all this, there was a lot of math involved, and my math I forgot because that was 50-some years ago. So I met this gentleman, Mark Carney, in Paris, and we were having one beer, I guess it was, only one beer in Paris.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And I said, I got this idea, and he goes, I'm a math bitch.
Not quite how that happened, but we'll let it go. Let it
No,
go.
it was
Let it
close.
That's it. Near
No,
enough,
actually,
yeah.
I said, you're my math bitch, what I said.
Yeah, that's actually true.
And,
yeah.
and we started working this, and he goes, oh shit, this might actually be interesting. And so what we're going to go through is how do we fix, we know security's broken, and we're going to kind of go through some of the thinking that I've gone through. Please interrupt, please shout it out, and I'm going to hand things over to Mark and back and forth, because he's taking the work that we've been working on and kind of really formalizing it, which will be coming out in the book with all the math shit that none of us will understand. So, measuring security, the fundamental thing that we have to start doing in our field is we don't know how to hold vendors. Any vendors in the room? Anybody willing to admit they're a vendor? Oh boy, okay, you guys, your shit sucks. What we're doing is we let users figure out how well their performance is at home, but yeah, we still can't measure security. We're trying to fix security, but how do you fix something if you can't even measure it? So part of the first step of this is looking at how do you measure security in such a way that you're able to then construct an architecture that will actually work, or potentially.
You're not human.
No, that's nothing too, because I'm a cyborg, so fuck you.
Something called burn unit,
You're
yeah.
gonna give me your phone again, right? So, first step was, let's get rid of zeros, let's get rid of ones, and let's look at everything in the middle, and everything in the middle is called analog. And I grew up an analog engineer, audio and video back in the 60s and 70s, And so I speak analog, and suddenly different sorts of answers began appearing when we started looking and introducing different concepts that are analog concepts. Right now, it's a little bit differently. So, fundamental issue was about a book that I wrote almost 20 years ago. A couple of you may have read it, Time-Based Security. And basically it said, in order to be secure, and I'm going to put that in quotes, of course, you have to have two conditions. You have to know how long it takes your black box detection system, whatever your black box detected. How long does it take to detect it? And then how long does it take to react to it? And what do you include in the reaction? Do you include mitigation? Do you include the human? What do you include in that process? If you know for an absolute fact that your vendor will guarantee in writing, all vendors stand up with their written guarantees, please, that their product, thanks for the finger, dude. That their product will withstand any attack in the world for the amount of time it takes to detect and react to some anomaly in the system. That's the only time that you can actually say you're secure. Everything else is a wild-ass guess. So that was the fundamental premise that came out, believe it or not, of a bar napkin in Warsaw, Poland in 1995. So it has worked, but everything we're dealing with in security, we have omitted one critical metric: time. Everything we live with is about time. When we wonder about what is the purpose of the brain, and for those of you who have been studying neuroscience, the brain only has one function: remember the past in order to be able to predict the future, and the present is Planck's time, 10 to the minus 42nd. That's it. That's what we do. However, with computers, and we're trying to interface with them, social engineering, all the other bullshit, we're trying to do it with this digital format. Doesn't work. We know this shit doesn't work, but vendor out there, your next generation shit will fix it, right? Next Gen 5, come on, next gen is going to fix everything. So that was the fundamental. The second thing that started really looking is control systems. I grew up in an analog world. I grew up as an EE, electrical engineer. In order to make anything in the real world work and have some degree of stability, you have to have feedback. There is no alternative. Do we ever use feedback in our control systems in security today? No, we don't, and the vendor here is getting ready to shit himself. Well, yeah, so is your buddy there, and
I would disagree with that comment. I would say that the human is actually the person who regulates.
that depends upon the architecture, and we will get there. From a pure technology standpoint, this is accurate. We're going to get into that because there are some of the things that we have to do. But we have the mechanical balls to the wall system, we've got the acoustic systems, we've got electrical systems, and these are all simple abstractions of feedback. Feedback is a time-based function based upon input, output, and then how much of that circulatory stuff we're going to allow to occur. ICS and SCADA systems, every single one of them are time-based feedback systems. They are not absolute binary controls. That's why Holland survives, because they can gauge the water heights and the wind heights, and these are all analog functions that are continuously variable over time. Neuroscience, synaptic weighting. This means that we've got biasing. Biasing is that slight amount of adjustment, or maybe a macro adjustment, depending upon how many inputs you have into your matrix in order to make decisions. These are not binary. This is the way the brain works. We're going to AI, we're going to neural nets. None of them are absolute answers. They are all approximations that change with intensity on an analog basis over time. So in what we're doing, that's fundamentally the way things are structured right now. It's an either or condition. We connected, we're not connected. We got bandwidth, we got speed, we have whatever the measurements we currently have are very, very static. So let's go to war for a minute and look at what John Boyd did back in 1984. He published a paper called the OODA Loop, which said that in order to survive a dogfight, the only thing you have to do is get inside the time-based decision loop of your adversary, meaning you gotta be faster. all it is. You gotta be faster. Now, what this process is, whether I'm in war, market research, anything that occurs, pen testers, the minute you guys are finished doing a pen testing, your clients are secure, right? Yeah, you did laugh out loud, sir. You better keep that to yourself. There is no binary function. The pen tester knows that you have to keep this iterative cycle going all of the time in order to be able to have any sort of reliance upon your figures. And just because they're gone at 3 and they can check off the box for the board, wow, we passed this test. Yeah, well, so fucking what? So applying OODA loop, again, a dynamic analog function, is mission critical to the way we're thinking. Second thing that we do not use very much in our world is OOB, out of band. I know with Bank of America, I really like their out of band functions, and I try to do something on my mobile app, or I try to do it on the computer. Wait a minute, is that really Win? Is that really you? Then they go out of band on some other control circuit. Now, this is where TCP/IP comes in. TCP/IP is the best of the world. It's also the worst of the world because one wire does it all. The information and data path is flowing along the same wire as the control signals are, which means when you get hosed, you're totally hosed. You get cut, you're totally cut. There is no alternative. And as Gene Spafford from Purdue points out so notably, the internet was designed for survivability, not to survive a hostile attack. Entirely different approach. So out-of-band systems is something else from an architectural standpoint that we are not doing. We're trying to jam more and more and more shit down the same pipe. And what is that? Greater single point of failures built into all of our architectures. Now, let's look at how my wife's car works. And some of you may have some of the new collision avoidance systems. And basically what it does is it's warning you. It says, okay, there's a car here. You put on your blinkers, oh, don't turn. Or if it's on your blinker, you don't get a message because there's not a car to your left or your right or speeding up behind you. How much do you trust your collision avoidance system? Or do you invoke an automatic feedback loop of turning your head still in order to view and get a secondary opinion? That's a feedback loop for confirmation. Out of band. Really simple example in life that we do automatically. Now with autonomous cars and all of this, I don't know how we're going to evolve in the future. We're just going to give over complete control to Skynet in our vehicles. I don't know. But this is the way that we should be doing things right now, and it's a very simple thing. Now, the key here in the feedback loop is time. How much time do we intuitively, does this analog little device here, expect us to confirm that there is really not a car there? How much time? Do we think about it, or is it intuitive? It's just something we do on our own. This is part of the approach that we need to take with network security to start getting some answers. So at this point, I'm going to hand this over to Mark because this is the key component of everything with analog network security, and it's called a time-based feedback flip-flop, and it's based on Boolean logic from George Boole in the 1840s. Mark.
Okay, so who doesn't know a flip-flop? Okay, so you're all familiar with it. Okay, good. So the idea is you bring in that level of thinking, you bring in that manner of, not relying on just one particular line of information to be able to let you control in a similar way what you saw in the collision avoidance system. Okay, so we're going to take here, if you follow it here, where are we? Right, so we have an enable or we have a disable. Okay. We either let something through or we don't let something through. That's what we're trying to look at. Now that's a binary output, but it comes from an analog way of thinking about the processing of that information. Okay? The core concept is to move away from absolutism, to move away from, this is absolutely how it works. This is, the only way in which we can assess something, towards having this feedback. And also, you noted in the machine learning, the neural network model, you also have feed-forward notions as well, where information can be passed around. What you want to do is you want to basically build a system that has awareness and move away from increasing your protection time and towards squeezing these OODA okay? Decrease the detection time, decrease the reaction time, and then that'll let you sit inside your attacker's decision matrix. Their payoff will actually, the way they're measuring their payoffs will not be the same because of what you're doing, inspired by this analog thinking. So Alice makes a choice, okay? But Bob has to approve it. And there's a delay being introduced, which means that you have to wait. You have to have a moment of hiatus just to say, right, am I going to get this approval? If it doesn't happen, then it doesn't go through. Okay? If it does happen, it goes through. And you can put in here more or less whatever you want. If you want it to be a TCP session being initiated, well, you know, you make it start and then it's going to carry on going because that's the way the TCP works. But what we're after is building in, I mean, we have it for other systems, you know, missile control. It takes 2 keys. You know, we have it as well in terms of trust that if you don't use your bank card, if you don't use your credit card for several months, what happens to your credit rating? Well, it falls off the face of the earth, doesn't it? Credit comes from creditas, Latin for trust. We already have this intuitive notion in other systems for how we deal with trust. So why aren't we doing it in network security? Why aren't we building it forward? Time is the important metric. You'll notice that in the equations before, we had this term T being involved, okay? That's not because, you know, we're putting time in and we're doing something weird and crazy. It's just to say that we are depending on time. That it is stateful from the point of view of time equals 0 and then iteratively down that loop. But is time really discrete here? Of course it is. Because computers work on clock cycles. They work on this ability to measure out time. So how do you bridge this link between this analog, smooth, continuous thinking and your discrete notions of clock cycles and bits and ones and zeros and bytes and whatever else? Well, what you do is you say, well, if we allow the function to, in the limit, become smooth, then you actually are fine. You don't actually lose anything at all. But what you gain is a way of thinking about trust which ties in to all the things that we're actually doing. So let's look at a door alarm. You open the door in the morning, right, and you have 30 seconds to get to that panel, okay? Now, if you don't get there in time, that delay kicks in, you didn't give it the second authorization, and then suddenly you have an alarm, and it goes off. We don't question this. We never question this. This is totally, totally obvious to us when we think about it in terms of physical alarms. Of course you've got to let 30 seconds. It takes him 25 seconds to even get from the door to the panel. And he's going to get the code wrong at least twice, you know, because he's, you know, he's still on code 2 previous. So the idea is that we don't question it here at all. Why do we question it when it comes down to network security? Why aren't we doing this kind of stuff? There's a book called Intuition Pumps, where it talks about not thought experiments, but things that will get your intuition going, things that will make you think in the right way. Here's, I think for you, these things generate about, what is it, petabytes of data?
It's terabytes of data. The average engine, this is either a GE or you guys have an engine company over there. Oh, it's called Rolls-Royce.
Rolls-Royce, yeah. It's only small, you know.
There are over 5,000 detection points in the engine
Yeah.
that are sampling every single second, which gets back to the concept of how our brain works, of I want to be able to remember so I can predict the future. That's why engine failures are so incredibly rare these days, because they're able to predict based upon so many analog points. The greater the granularity of detection and depth, the smoother the function becomes.
So once you have all this information, then suddenly, you know, they can predict when the engine's going to go right, when it's going to go wrong, and they can anticipate that fact. Okay? And there's that anticipation that we want to build in. Okay? So suppose you have a claim from a vendor that says, right, we can do a particular thing with this much accuracy or with this much reliability. Well, how do we actually measure that? How do we take into account all of the things that we want to when we introduce time? So we now have some known good traffic and some known bad sample, okay? And we should be able to go, right, good traffic, good traffic, good traffic, good traffic, good traffic, good traffic, virus, malware, whatever you want to call it, good traffic, good traffic, good traffic. How long does it take from the moment that goes to the device to the moment it says it's detected something? There's your detection time. It's a simple experiment you can do in a test bed. Okay? That is a metric. That is something you can use and should be using when you're doing all your risk assessments and when you're doing your architectures.
There's a trust factor that is the inverse of risk. So you can start evaluating trust inside of systems with actual hard, measurable numbers to call out vendors when they suck. We're anticipating based upon just a simple model to be able to do comparative vendor analysis that are in the black box world to see 3 orders of magnitude of differential in efficacy and performance between them. So we are hoping to really piss off a lot of people in the industry once this stuff hits the test bed. Sorry.
That's fine. But also note, I mentioned before that your trust decays when you have a financial system, for example. Your trust dies away if you don't use it, if you don't reevaluate or revalidate the trust that you had before. Your credit score goes down. Notice here, if you keep doing this, you don't do this just once, you keep doing it. The idea is it carries on going. Suddenly then, if a new attack comes in, you have a sample, say, or you have something new, you can put that in and see if it detects it, and you get a way of actually measuring the response time versus the actual response coverage as well. So you can relativize all of this very straightforward. Okay, so if you're not applying updates or the vendor isn't giving you updates in time enough, you'll be able to anticipate that in the model. That's the idea.
Any questions at this point? Because now it's going to start getting tough.
So when you're factoring in that known bad safety, right, does that imply that the vendor product will actually know, like, there's so many different permutations of a bad sample, a lot of the products won't even detect a known bad.
Right.
So how does that factor in?
Well, we're treating as black boxes. I don't care what the hell it is. It could be IDS, IPS, firewall. It doesn't matter. It is anything that a vendor claims, we can solve this, we can detect this. I don't care what it is. So if you say you can detect it, that's going to go into our bad sample. Everything else is good sample. The only thing we're trying to do initially is not quantify the efficacy of what they're doing. We're caring about the time it takes to do it.
What if the time's forever?
If the time's forever, then go get another vendor.
Asterisk, never say never.
Yeah, again, if you get a really good point here that I want to focus on 1 second. Our greatest enemy in security is infinity. If we have no upper bounded limit, and no lower bounded limit of the performance that's expected from our systems in the time domain, that's why we're failing now. Because we're expecting 0 time and allowing infinity. As soon as we have those unbounded conditions, we fail, and that's where we've been since 1972 with the Anderson model. Continue.
There's a thing, catch me later, there's a linear programming model that I've made to explain quite how that kind of fits together. Question?
Isn't the time differential that you're actually concerned in the time difference between known good traffic and an unknown bad sample becoming known?
That's a different question.
Yes.
Okay.
Totally different question. This is just looking at one piece of bad sample. How long does it take black box to detect it? That's all we care about in this.
But that's still very binary thinking of pattern matching 1-0.
I don't care. No, that's your black box. I don't care. You can do it analog, you can do it digital. You're going to give me, this is a bad output. You're going to say this is bad.
Virus check.
Yeah. Virus check, IDS, malware check. It doesn't matter. I don't.
But the time becomes irrelevant.
No, the time is totally critical because it's going to take you somewhere between 0 and infinity to detect it. And it's going to be based upon your algorithms, it's going to be based upon how much memory, the performance of the hardware. There's a whole shitload of variables that go into these black boxes, and the vendors also use our appliance, now use this appliance, go to AWS. Each environment is going to change the time factor from the hardware performance alone. Over time, if the vendor is doing his good job, then the efficacy of the algorithms is naturally going to improve, and then that time should be squeezed. Yes?
So this seems like it's really only defending against DOS attacks.
Well, let us continue.
Okay.
Is it safe at this point to say that ultimately the human should have the final say?
That's going to be an arbitrary piece of the architecture which we will address. The human can be in the loop, does not have to be in the loop. Right? So the human is just another object in the time-based chain.
If it's ultimately a moving target and you have indefinite factors such as hardware specs and time in and out,
but we want those kind of questions to come out. Where do you insert a human into a technical OODA loop?
So to come back onto that point again, this is actually the metric that you get out of that test is what you use in terms of your detection. Exactly. So, but the reason that so your question would come in terms of like a second dimension of time, in terms of the way in which, this is why I'm saying you don't just do it once, you keep on doing it. And then you can measure that time between, actually, it takes vendor X, 3 months to notice that this is a thing. And yet it takes vendor Y 2 months or something.
Or it takes Equifax 60 days to sell their stock.
Or infinity days to notice 30 web shells. So it's to build models that will help us fix little points and to be able to get pieces of information that we can actually use.
This is actually talking point. This is a collection.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
metric that we'll use.
Exactly. So imagine that we have 20 black boxes from 20 vendors, and then we're trying to get out physical, actual values, real values, which will let us then start building proper models and say, right, this works really well in conjunction with this and this, because here what you're doing, again, it's squeezing that OODA loop, it's getting those times right down. Stop thinking that it's to increase your protection time, which is the conventional way, fortress mentality, Whereas actually what you want to do is say, I'm going to detect and then react to something faster. The things which we're using
And
on our
CISOs
network.
and management got to get over the fact that secure is not a real state.
So some of the things that we want to build into this is a more Bayesian way of thinking. Okay, who's unfamiliar with Bayesian statistics? Okay, there'll be a very quick crash course then. Like it might actually be a car crash course, but I mean, I'll try. So why would you use a Bayesian model? Okay, if I have a disease which affects 1 in 1,000 people, and I have a test for this disease that is 99% effective, and I test positive for this disease on this test, what's the percentage likelihood that I actually have that disease? Who thinks it's like 50-50? Who thinks it's above 50? Who thinks it's well below 50? Good, that's the right answer. For those of you who are unclear, here's why. In the 1,000 people, you have 1 in 1,000 that actually has it, and you have 10 people that don't have it but will test positive. Okay? So if you test positive, you're now 1 in 11, 9%. This is why the medical profession invented the second opinion, or the second test. Because if you do the same test again and you get a second positive, then you feed in the previous test result and then you get 90% confidence.
That's why your girlfriends always pee twice to make sure that they're not pregnant. The 60s, I mean, come on. We had sex in the 60s.
Thanks for that visual.
Yeah. That's not on a slide, I checked.
That's not your Jeopardy slide.
Yeah, that's a very...
Protection time work into that.
It depends on
Actually,
what
there
background.
is.
Never mind.
No, those companies have the numbers. It's still Bayesian.
It is. So if you...
So you guys are always relying on Bayesian statistics. Why don't you use multiple models to build up your observation points? And the other question is, so going back to the previous example, we're talking about a single point in time where you're observing one instance of traffic. You guys account for scale, so part of the OODA loop is observations. So you need multiple observations from multiple perspectives in order to understand. It's the reason why humans respond differently to various variables or stimulus in the environment. So you guys accommodate those aspects or those variables?
It scales up in a few slides.
Yeah, it does. Your first question also gets covered. If it doesn't, please remind us and I'll fix it. But yeah, so this is the kind of way that we're thinking about the having the verification as also being built in. So you observe and keep observing. You never stop observing. That's why it's the OODA loop. And then when we finally find that vendor A is now detecting this thing, we can get a time measurement for the time it takes it. How many known bad samples of a particular thing does it take for it to notice, for example? And in what succession? Does it take 3 samples, or does it take 3 within 30 seconds? How do you relativize all these things? Okay, so there's lots more measurements that can be made across this whole system, but keeping it simple, because otherwise you get very, very messy diagrams that look like I don't know,
Some of the later ones.
yeah, some of the later slides. So this is kind of a more kind of completed kind of matrix flow diagram, whereby again we have the black box security mechanism to trigger out. So we now have a way of measuring our detection, and we're also going to look to measure the remediation is being complete. Okay. Not necessarily a notification to the user, but looking at the way in which the remediations are now complete. Here is our DT and here is our RT, and now we have a complete picture of what the OODA loop looks like for this particular device.
And in the OODA loop, to answer your question, could be a human.
Yes.
Remediation, we're not saying that it's only technical remediation. There may be a human in that loop at one step. However, the thing to keep in mind is that as soon as you introduce the human into the loop, your time factor is going through the roof.
Yeah.
And by orders of magnitude, very, very quickly. So that has to be taken into account when you're trying to evaluate the trust of a particular process in whether it's network or at the coding level.
Yeah. So you can also look at this same kind of approach of measuring like phishing vendor products, okay? So a user clicks on something stupid that they really shouldn't click on, okay? Stupid user will do stupid user thing because, you know, user might not have the right training or might just think, oh, I really like Pokemon, and then they download that app anyway. That too, you know, their own really, you know. I still read the things on Pine, so, you know, you're way ahead of me. So a user clicks on some stupid shit, and then you introduce a delay, and you look up the link and you do your thing. And you can actually say that there are vendors who are doing things that are a little bit like this, okay? But what we want to do is start building up a more formal model, a more accurate and justifiable model, which will start saying, right, you should be approaching it this way, and if your metrics on various points of measurement don't match up, then you're not doing it right. There's room for improvement. But it also gives you room for comparison. Vendor A can do this really fast. Vendor B hasn't got a
And so
clue
the
by
introduction
comparison.
of the delay or negative time factor is adjusted based upon the measurement of the performance of the vendor. That can be fixed, can be adjusted over time.
Yeah.
At some point in the future, perhaps, if this model works, that could be part of the feedback loop using the neural processes that'll keep adjusting it based upon the varied inputs. But
Yeah.
again, that's going to be out in the future. We're trying to come up with a fundamental model here.
Yeah. And also keeping it as abstract and high level as we can so as not to lose ourselves in too many details for specific
And
cases.
so in this case, if your phishing vendor is at 99.9999, which would be roughly 6 sigma efficacy, then the amount of delay that is introduced into it is going to be absolutely, completely unnoticeable. Yet, with that delay, you're giving the vendor its opportunity to have a trust factor that's going to meet a 6 sigma standard. And doing the same, I think there's another slide coming up, you can do this not only in phishing, but you can do it in SMTP, you can do it in any human process at all that becomes non-noticeable to the human.
I mean, here the example is that there's a delay line in terms of assessing that email before it's even seen by the user. You know, so you have a lot of things you can actually do that we can build and start looking at these more intricate models with a kind of mathematical justifiability for saying we're doing this because that means that we're going to do this. We're going to affect this detection time. We're going to squeeze that and get it down as narrow as possible. Okay. Do you want to talk about the ISP stuff?
All right. Now, DOS is one of the biggest problems out there. We know how to sort of kind of detect DOS-like stuff. Now, what we don't do is communicate. When an enterprise is DOSed, it has its appliance sitting there, and the appliance is doing its damnedest to try to detect it and remediate it and all of those good things. However, we also know that that is not a universal fix, because without the help of upstream carriers, you're leaving the enterprise all on its own to fix a problem that is actually, especially in the DDoS world, one that is tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 involved, and you have to get them involved. So in this case, all we're saying is that we're going to have some sort of detection reaction process that's going to occur at the enterprise endpoint. When something is detected, and only at that point, communicate upstream one hop to your primary carrier, where you're getting the traffic from. We know where the traffic's coming from. It's coming from him. Tell him, ISP, you're an ISP first hop, I am seeing X traffic. Can you help me filter it out? Well, ISPs are real good at filtering stuff really fast. So stop it, filter it. Now continue on. And what we do is we introduce a delay line. And that delay line, or negative time, is introduced based upon the efficacy and the speed at which the detection and reaction and mitigation occur between the enterprise and that first hop. What does that mean? It means that the traffic then is momentarily halted until a remediation is occurring one hop up. If we introduce the flip-flop in the feedback loop, then we've got a second level of confirmation of the activity that occurs to verify within the bound, not perfect, but the bounded limits of the trust factor, somewhere between 0 and infinity. And obviously we're trying to approach 1 with trust factor and keep it as high as possible. So this process is still on premises with just talking one hop up. If we start doing it with multiple levels and tiers, now keep in mind that the way ISPs work is they don't talk many to many from like 1 million to 1 million. They're like 6 or 8 or 10 that talk to each other. Tier 1s, then they'll do the tier 2s, and there's limited paths of conversation here. But when you're in a DOS attack of any sort, your primary communication channel is gone. So what do? You have to go out of band, and this goes back to the out of band concept with a detection and reaction matrix with a protocol, and talk to each other. When you do this, what happens? Suddenly, if every single ISP in the world did this, and they had this massive detection reaction matrix, which is not high bandwidth at all, very, very low bandwidth, suddenly we'll know where the DOS is coming from. We'll know where the spam is coming from. We'll be able to understand how to stop it at the source. We will find 50 million grandmothers that are infected and be able to tell them your machine is part of a botnet, because we will be able to then understand exactly how the traffic is propagating across the entire global network with a very simple out-of-band matrix that's based upon all of the math that Mark was talking about. So I'm going to go back to let you have it. But that takes the concept, because it will work on spam and DDoS, because they're effectively, in my mind,
then you should be able to find a way of blocking stuff. So static security is a fail, and we know this is going to be very true already. We're seeing machine learning models being brought into security because they have this dynamism. They also have some pitfalls as well, things like the semantic gap and that sort of stuff, which we don't cover here at all. But what we're trying to do is push forward and say this is good. We need to bring out these particular details. Without feedback, we have network chaos. Infinity is this real enemy. And if we look at this min-max approach, this abandonment of absolutes, then what we're able to do is to squeeze this loop, get loopy, and then at the same time only mean something on a quantum level node. Okay? It's meaningless. You can't ever really truly be in sync. What we're trying to do is get things to happen with a delay, build in these other analog notions, and then what we're able to do is start looking at a new way of hopefully fixing a few things.
I'm going to comment on this, and the reason we bring in the quantum issue here is, again, I'm going to pick on vendors. And how many of the vendor sales guy go, oh, it happens in real time, it happens instantaneously. Bullshit! There is no such thing, unless you've got entanglement sorted out. So come on. And it's a lot, and I'm picking on vendors because they have been part of the problem, but they also are potentially one of the greatest avenues for solution to be able to start taking these concepts and actually building them into an integrated whole. But the concept of instantaneity is something we need to get over and quit using and trying to convince people that there is such a thing as real time in networks.
When you're building solutions in a company or building solutions even as a vendor. Okay, if you know that you're going to be, not to gamify the thing, but to have solid metrics which are actually going to be of good use and of meaningful content to people who are building networks and who ultimately are protecting users. So you examine security process for intrinsic feedback. How else can this feedback be implied? How can we take this from the very few examples we've shown here, and how can we build that forward? Where else can we do this? How else can we do this? What else can be done to encourage this in ways that maybe it hasn't been done before, now that we are trying to build some very mathematically justifiable and stable models to say, right, here's a good way of thinking about this, what can we do now? What's next? Okay? And that, I think...
That is a high-level pitch on where analog network security is going. The concepts at this point, I think Mark mentioned SMTP. By putting in negative time into SMTP, suddenly that email that went out with all the private data to 50 of your competitors with the appropriate policy and delay time and feedback loop, we would expect, with not too stupid people, but if you introduce that feedback loop in there with proper detection mechanisms, to decrease that kind of SMTP problems that are so prevalent, especially with data extrication. Whether it's data extrication over SMTP or any other path, again, that gets back to the concept of detection black box. Do you have a confidential data exfiltration filter on your network? Well, if you do, tie it into this model, and we can start then figuring out the time, amount of delay that is required in order to not detect it after it's already left the facility, which is the way that we're treating shit now. We'll detect it, but oh shit, just happened. Well, we detected it within 4 minutes, that's not bad. No, maybe you should have had a 4-minute delay prior to the event actually going. If you know that the efficacy of your time-based detection product is 4 minutes, build in a damn delay. This is not rocket science, but we're still trying to go back on absolutism. The root problem of the Bob and Alice issue, whether we're talking code, identification, administration, the problem of having 6 administrators, which is the average number of administrators you have to have for a particular mission critical box in order to cover 24/7. And you add in your trust factors of each of those individuals, the math of it's all Bayesian stuff comes down that suddenly your trust factor has gone down by a factor from 460%, I think the number is. It's something insane because we do not have any external validation or feedback process. All of the administrators are given equal opportunity to fail with each other. And the Bayesian math proves how weak our multiple administration system is, which is why then introducing the feedback loop and the time base, you can use it either as both are required to do it prior to the action, or the secondary authentication must occur within a specific amount of time. And then you can then measure the amount of exposure time that you've got, and once you understand your exposure time, you can translate that into data risk, because data exfiltration is another function of time. So everything relates back to time. So this is now time for you to beat the shit out of us, and please ask the hard questions, what you like and what you don't like.
So,
I saw you first.
To address the nature of this feedback loop and that necessary delay for it to occur for non-real-time, or I'm sorry, for closer to real-time or end-user expected real-time communication. SMTP, we're used to a logical delay. Filters, there's all sorts of great technologies that go a step toward something about, but maybe not a full implementation.
There's an awful lot of stuff that exists. This is an architectural model. The math is not actually all that difficult, but it's looking at it from the standpoint of time as the primary metric, so I can have data that will translate into all the different disciplines and be able to introduce the delays in order to compensate for the performance that we can now should be able to measure. So it's basically a compensating control, and that's a CISSP question, isn't it?
It's also relativizing it as well. So we mentioned, it's also relativizing it. So we also mentioned there was an exfiltration time. If you assume your attacker has perfect knowledge, inside jobs are a thing, take all the data, the IP, the user data, everything you've got, and just blob it together as the database. Take the size of that, and take the bandwidth out of the door, and then divide the two together. You get a time. You get a time that you can actually work with in terms of trying to relativize all of these detection reaction times.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That could occur even on a per endpoint basis, as long as there's some sort of aggregate or cumulative measurement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
In
In terms of actually building this system architecture, what extra is needed?
This is an 8-hour talk that we focused a couple little bits on. There are coding examples, there's human examples in the book, there's a network, there is all the security. So we've got lots of different examples of how to do it with all the network diagrams and the supporting map behind it. Not right now, no, absolutely. We're not trying to productize it. I'm assuming vendors will jump on the bandwagon and smart people will start finding ways to use it and improve upon the model is the concept here. There's nothing like this yet, and we're hoping that it's on the right path.
One of the big things will be a protocol definition.
How is that, like, so from a vendor perspective, right, sometimes a vendor will have an endpoint solution, but it's like a network solution. So how does your model of SDK together, those systems actually talk to each other? Because if it's a black box, and you deploy multiple systems, you will actually get lower.
Maybe. We don't know that.
Right, but the thing is, how do you, like, if you're intended implementation of your like, comparison algorithm, right, it's like,
Where is we're looking at a decision point. Where is the decision point? You've got an input to your system that says, well, where is the decision point? That's a certain point after a vendor, multiple vendors integration. Where is the final queue, the queue output of the logic?
The thing is, like, in order to do that, you have to, like, that's the, like, is like, first, like, IDC, right, but then, like, so the idea is, it doesn't matter which organization, vendor products,
All we're doing is measuring time.
That's fine.
The efficacy of it we can measure. Because we know what known good, we know what known bad is, we know where we should be approximately. I think there's another session coming in, so we should probably be happy to talk about it outside.
Effectively, mathematically, you are relatively secure because these numbers are.
So whoever's coming in, thank you. Whoever stayed, thank you. I mean, this was just, it's con, right? It's how things happen here.
To a more like data-driven security risk assessment. Like how you feel.
Which are the extended legrooms?
Great presentation.
Thank you very much.
The exit row. Yes,
This morphed.
Is it Schwartau?
Schwartau.
Schwartau, John, nice to meet you. Yeah, we got one. Great to meet you. Yeah, that was a fantastic speech. Are you guys gonna hang around and talk?
Yeah, no, we're here. We're here to discuss and talk about.
Perfect.
You're just going to put stuff away.
Oh, they already got one on there, so, okay. Don't have to worry about it.
Are you vendor?
There's already one on there, so Adrian has it on there.
Detection space, so we'll get to that. It's English research now.
The box is stable Jeopardy.
Worry about that later.
Anyway, what we've done is taken the reverse approach to like the vendor consolidation. We've taken it, ran some research, and the way we did it.
Which, thinking of the topic of this, is even more hilarious than just doing overalls.
Or electronic countermeasures and electronic warfare functions.
Because they're all pieces of
What's that?
equation.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, good options.
No, I was anti-IO because I.
Oh, wow, they do have HDMI to be
trying to
That's
leave
interesting.
the existing box, and they spent $160 million trying to define something that by definition is undefinable. I know. Yeah, we should vote. Yeah. Otherwise, we'll just run another session here. Oh, thank you.
Okay. Let me see what this looks like. See if it even looks halfway decent. Alright, now, how do I get that up there? Hello? No? Yeah, it's annoying. I'll play with it in a minute. Alright, let's go view. Center view. Right or wrong? Yes or no?
What happened?
I don't know.
There it goes.
There it goes. Yay. We have working technology. And if I wait. Move that one over there. Yeah, that's good. Switch over? No. Damn it. Ah, damn it. That's annoying, but
What's that?
it's not switching over easy, so
Wait. Just exit out.
I'll do that.
Oh, I see. It's not on the same display.
Is it not switching over? Oh well. Let's go ahead and get this squared away as much as I can while we're waiting. We have like a minute, so. Okay, that all works. Why are you doing that? How do I exit out of that? Show. Then I'll switch over. Okay, and then how do I resume? Good question. Where are you Oh, well, we'll just run with it.
Just have to exit out and do like you're doing here.
Yeah. I had working on Windows before, but oh well. Alright. Whenever you're ready, man. Can you hear me? Oh yeah, good. Let me know whenever you're all ready over there.
What?
All right, good. So, well, hope everybody's having a good time here at DerbyCon. Yeah, 7 years of it so far is going strong. I've been here every year, loved it every year, love coming back. So, as I hope everybody's in the right room, you can read the slide, you can read your schedule. If you're not here to hear us talk about random story about how we went through the process of trying to write our own RAT, C2, whatever you want to call it, you're in the wrong room. Or you can just sit around and listen to us make fools of ourselves and try to tell a story up here, then try to get y'all to laugh somewhere along the way. So, one thing I will say is, this is came as How about now? Oh, there you go. It's coming out a little bit, so sorry. I'll hold on to it. So, this talk came out as a sort of a side effect or follow along with a tool that Bill and I wrote earlier this year. We actually were trying to write a fairly full-featured command and control, RAT, whatever you want to call it. And in the process, we realized that we were going through a particular process of building one out that other people might find interesting, or the steps that we went through, or it might apply to other things other than just writing this, but other tools in general. So we're like, yeah, why not? Let's write it up as a talk and come out and present it. We're not presenting that tool. We're presenting the process that we built that tool, as well as some of the steps along the ways with code and demos and what have you. All the code will be out on GitHub at some point later today, because I didn't have Wi-Fi or internet before the presentation, and I forgot to do it. I'm running late because I'm lazy. So it will be up there. You'll see my contact info at the end. Hit me up or follow me on Twitter or something. I'll post it out there. So go ahead and get started here. First of all, the obligatory who am I slide. My name is Adam Compton. I've been in the InfoSec field, somewhere in there, for around about 18 plus years. During that time, I've done programming, pen testing, research. Currently, I work for Rapid7, so does Bill here. This isn't a product for Rapid7, but they paid our way, so we put their name up there. Oh, on the first slide we did. So that's enough. Enough with that. But yes. Who am I beyond that? Father, son, husband, brother. Love my kids, love my family. It's with their help that I get to come out here and do stuff like this. My wife and son is actually with me right now. They're out playing somewhere, I don't know. And yes, it says a hillbilly, born and raised in, well, most of my life raised in Eastern Kentucky, back in Pike County, hillbilly heritage, all that, love it. And it's not just the overalls, but they're comfortable and it's nervous.
Kick off our presentation here. We got some dogs with.
Sisters? What?
Oh wait, did you put this in there?
Yeah, that was you.
Oh, sorry about that.
Co-workers.
Yeah. Cool.
No, kidding. So, no, we're not above cheap laughs.
Yeah,
here.
we're fishing for cheap laughs here. So.
Sorry. It helps.
So yeah, I guess an actual agenda would help. So get over stage fright and get started. I don't know if that's done, but it's in progress. So we talked about ourselves, present the agenda. That's what I'm doing right now, and then we're going to ramble even more about this story about how we accidentally created this C2 rat botnet, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
This haphazard path of chasing down code and figuring out, well, hey, let's try this, try that, and suddenly we had a working product. So we can talk about that, whatever else, meandering, take questions, and then probably go get drinks later.
Yeah, so it's always good. It's DerbyCon, come on.
So basic terminology, if you're not aware, I'm sure everyone already is, but RAT, remote administration tools, so that's like old school back office, things like that. C2, command and control, similar to a RAT, but we're kind of defining RAT as sort of one-to-one shell sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas
RATs out there, things that are considered a remote access tool, it can have multiple of these, but it's usually server to node, server to agent, one to one. You might then move to another one, do it, stuff like that. Command and control it can send stuff out to multiple nodes at a time, stuff like that. That's fundamentally the biggest difference between the two. Other than that, they're effectively the same, just one does it, just how many targets you're dealing with. So.
Yeah, and for us, C2 means sort of like there's a master node or a master server, and then nodes where like you're issuing commands out, sort of thing. So it's not like a peer-to-peer, super advanced, I guess, C2. Botnet, which of course stands for Robot Network. It's like C2, but it's got the hacker connotation, I guess. It's only bad people use botnets, but we like botnets too. Yeah. So I mean, in short, it's basically all just distributed computing or some flavor of that, right? So what we were doing is sort of defining what sort of components we want our distributed computing environment to do, like push-pull files, exec commands, things like that.
Get to that on the next one.
So yeah, this kind of transitioning. So yeah, that sounds pretty much the same, right?
Yeah.
So common functions, as I said, raccoon, cat. Encrypted communications, upload, download files, exec system or shell commands. So when we were building this, we're security professionals, right? And we should probably.
Thank you, sir. Yep. All right. Instead of boring you all with actual we probably will bore you anyway, so don't worry about that. Try to do it in a little more of a flowing dialogue. Well, no, it's just story time. Just stick with story time here. So where this all originated from was we were out on an engagement, setting at a customer site, wanted to communicate back and forth with each other as things are going along. But the problem is we're on an internal network, didn't have access to the internet, things like Slack and all that don't work. So we couldn't really use that to communicate. We're not in the same room, physically located around the building. We're lazy, don't feel like get up and walking around. So how do you get with each other like that? We don't have smoke signals or anything, we're inside. So we ended up going back to the phones and just using instant messengers or Slack on there and going out. But this brought up a question like, how do you communicate internally like that? We wanted something dirt cheap or dirt simple to work with, something we could code up in a quick time, see if we could do that. So we're like, okay, let's just start with something really simple, just a little chat program. Hundreds of them exist out there. Surely we can write something just to do that. And this started us down our path. So first thing we had to do is decide what a chat program is. It's a server and multiple clients. Well, right off the bat, that sort of sounds like a C2, but we get to that later. What does it need to do? You have the client should be able to send data back and forth. A server needs to route data around. Yeah. We're not trying to recreate something here like Google Hangouts or something like that where you have private messages, you have groups. No, just simple chat. All broadcast chat. So in the process, we ended up looking through and writing something up really simple in Python. Why? Because, well, it's Python and we know it and it's easy and there's libraries and stuff. So let's go ahead and I'll just jump over into a quick little chat program here. This will be a running theme. We'll talk a little about something, do a little demo, show the code, all that. And that's my phone somewhere ringing. So ignore the phone for a moment. I don't know where it is.
It's on your chat notification feature.
Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah, no. Every step we're going through here, we'll be adding additional features to it, showing additional functionality, things of that. So go ahead and jump over into the chat demo real quick. Hold on just a second. Show you as simple as it is to write a little chat program if you wanted to. So, jump over. Port on it, you can type stuff in and send it out to people, and you can receive messages and reroute them to other clients. That's it. Nothing else. Same thing from the client side. It's you connect up to the server, you loop, you hear something from the server, you write it out to the screen, you type something in, it sends it out. Not much to demo, but go ahead and do something real quick here. So server 127.0.0.1.555, just a name. Yeah, okay. Down here, same thing. Every step we'll just be going through the same sort of stuff, just, oh, I'm not in one. All right. Stupid simple, just to demo that it does work. Yeah. Bob. All right. Here you can say, oops, you can say hi, shows up as hi. Down here you can say bye. And it goes back. Okay. We have a chat program. Yay. It works on multiple nodes. We wrote chat. Yay. Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Okay. That's it. Goodbye. No. We'll next level along. Let's go back to where's that at? View. Does it go back to where it was?
I'm guessing not.
I'm betting no. Oh no! No.
Your Mac has crashed.
Hey, it did. Yay. All right. So, we're super tech here, super awesome programmers. We wrote a chat program in like, I don't know, way more lines than is probably necessary, but less than I actually expected it to be in Python. So, but at that point, we're like, okay, we have that. What else can you do? You can do encryption. Why? Because, well, we're pen testers and we flag the customer if they don't have encryption on all of their communication. So maybe we should do that, and we're sending sensitive data over it potentially. So we go and implement encryption, and I'll probably rework this flow a little bit here in a second. But there's a different couple of ways you can do encryption. You can do some of the standard things that some C2s out there do. You can tunnel everything over SSH. You can use SSL tunneling, stuff like that. Or you can be super lazy like we were and just use standard TCP sockets and encrypt the data packet and just send that. It works. We don't have to change anything to the chat program really. We just add a line that says encrypt and decrypt. We got it going. I'll show that when I'm doing the next demo as well. So we'll just go ahead and skip over this. But it's one of those things that you don't have to be super tech or super elite to write a encrypted program. Just start with a chat program, add a little bit of encryption. Okay, so you got a good basis to work off of here. The next thing we realized is, through this semi-fictional story, is that while we're in the distributed environment here, Bill's over there, Tom's over there, I'm here. Sometimes I won't be able to run a command for me on his system. Maybe I want to see if it changes from his location, from my location, the output. So I ask Bill to run it. He says, I'm sorry, I'm going to get food right now. I'll do it later. I'm like, well, here, what if I can go ahead and run a command off of his system for him? Well, great. We'll go ahead and add that into our little fictional program here. Or it's not really fictional. It's a in-progress program here, a wannabe program. So we go ahead and add in, we have encryption now. We can send messages. Well, let's go ahead and add in the execution or a command execution. So go ahead and do this one more time. I'll do all the demos here in a minute. That way I don't have to keep jumping back and forth. It takes up way too much time. I've got one more set here and then I'll go into some demos. So assuming we can execute commands, which I will demo in a moment, believe me. Well, I hope it works. It is live demo gods here. So Assuming you have that, one of the other features that we said that as a requirement, most C2s, RATs, all that has is push and pull files. Well, sometimes when you're running against a program or in this environment, I won't be able to run a command for me. He doesn't have that binary or whatever on his system. Fine, I'll push over the file and then run it. Or I want him to run a command like, I don't know, say nmap. Well, if I have an input file I want him to have, I'll push over the input file or target file and say run against that and let it run and collect the standard output of that. So let's go ahead, and now I will jump through some demos from those. So hold on just a second here. All right, let's jump into, I have that command, and was there another one up there? No, that's in the exec here. So we just have the exec command right now. I added a new feature. All right, let's go ahead and run that. Where am I at up here? Okay, that's slash server. I actually have that back here somewhere, don't I? Yeah. Bring that up. Let's clear this to the client. Now I can just do stuff like hi or hi, which, no, oh well. Let's do exec, and that should be cap, exec ls. I get ls output back. It's running it on the other client, getting it back. So yeah, I can execute commands. That's a building block. One of the things you'll notice as we're going through this is we enlarge on basically a step-by-step process. You get one thing working, then you move on to the next one, you add something else. So I get double set of output from it. Because I have two clients, right now it's acting more like just shotgun approach. Everybody do this, give me your output. So okay, we're getting there. Not exactly what we want it to do in the long run, but for right now it's a working prototype. So let's go ahead and exit out of that, go up a level, minimize these again. So first sockets for us, and that's not it. You can send broadcast messages, you can read send files, receive files, stuff like that. We got the code in there. We just pulled out encrypt and decrypt message into here just to help centralize things. As your code goes, it evolves. That's what we're helping show here. So let's remove whatever is in temp. All right. So let's go ahead and run the server again. Wherever it was. All right, got that going. Let's go to a received file test.txt. What it actually does on the client side, I'm running it from the same directory right now, so it's kind of odd, I know, but it makes a directory called temp, and in the temp directory, it puts test.txt, appends a 8-character or a 5-character random string to it, so if there's no file collision, you can make that whatever you want. You can add a lot more error handling, a lot more stuff like that. But what we're doing is we're just showing that, okay, now we can execute commands, we can push files. You're seeing how this is starting to build up over time. Well, that's great. Next things would be like pull files and remote shell and stuff like that. And we're actually getting into that. But first, there's a few other things that we need to talk about. Go back to it. Yay, okay. One of the other things you need to worry about is at this point we're talking about where you have some decent functionality in there that as a team we can make use of. It's nothing great, it's nothing that you can write home about, submit to some great tool repository somewhere, but it's something that's functional, it's utilitarian for our needs. And we've been building up a little bit. But as we're going, we're starting to add in more libraries to it, more files, external files, stuff like that we need to keep track of. And if we're wanting to hand it to another team member and say, here, go ahead and run this for us so we can continue on, we needed to bundle it together somehow, make it more unified, more single file, if you would. There's a couple ways out there. I'm sure there's more than what we have there, but Pi2exe, PyInstaller, things like that. All of those will take an entire Python project and bundle it down to a single binary, whether it's a Windows binary or an ELF binary for Linux, stuff like that. So you can just drop it on any system of that can run that binary type. It'll run, including all the libraries with it. Good to go. So now you're more along the lines of building agents, if you will, to drop onto systems, which, not doing the demo, but at that point we really started thinking that what we have here is getting much, much closer to a C2 environment as opposed to a chat program. We can send commands to execute, we can push files, we can have it all into one little binary, so we can drop it on there. So okay, that's great. So we decided to forego the whole chat program and just get up and walk and talk to each other if we need to. It's better for us. We sit on our butts too much as it is. So we decided just to go for more of the full C2 environment at this point, see how far we can get this going in just some spare time we had on the side. So okay, one of the first things you want to do is do built-in files back. Okay, you would think that would be along with the file push, but the way we actually wrote it is it was after the fact. With the file push, some of the things you need to think about is that, or why would you want to do that? Well, there might be a loop file there that you want to pull back, some sensitive file in the remote system. There might be an output of some file, something that doesn't write out to standard out, but it might create a file. You want to pull that back. So there's a decent number of reasons you want to do this, and this is getting us even further down that path of where we said that base level for what sort of a C2 environment is, push and pull files. Go ahead and jump over that. And finally, I'll go ahead and bundle the demos together in a minute so I don't have to keep jumping back and forth. So one of the things that is going to finalize it is this concept of a remote shell. Well, how is this different than issuing remote commands? Well, the biggest difference is that I don't know if you've ever tried to write a remote shell. It's not as intuitive as I first thought it would be. For example, you set it up, the connection, you send a command, that's great. You get the output. You type CD, hit enter, then you type a command. Well, the CD worked, and but then you're not in that directory anymore. Because each one of these commands that you execute are as a single execution, and then it resets basically the runtime environment where it's running. There's no state maintained. Writing something like Netcat, where you're sitting there and you maintain state on what directory you're in, is actually a little more difficult than I first intended or first anticipated. I ended up coming up with a way around it. I don't know if this is the way other people are doing it, but it's a fairly straightforward, intuitive way for myself to come up with this. Maybe other people can make use of it, but here again, it's just showing that you can do this by working step by step. The way I ended up doing it is, when we're in the code, I'll show it one more, is on a Unix environment or Windows environment, you can basically chain commands together. Unix, semicolon in between. So on a single command line, you can type cd /bin, semicolon, ls, and it'll give you the ls output of /bin. Well, you can do that through this as well. But then, the next time you execute a command, you're not in the bin directory anymore. Well, what happens if you, instead of just leaving it at that, you append to the end of every command the command like pwd, present working directory. So now every time you issue a command, you cd into a directory, or you issue the command and then you get the working directory back out of it at the end. Then if you stored that locally as, there's my phone again, somebody really wants me. You get the current working directory of that last command. So if you store that as a variable, then at the beginning of each new command, you prepend that to the command. So you cd into the last current working directory, issue the command that you're wanting to execute, and then store the new output. You can maintain state as you're going through and have a fully functioning remote shell. This way, even if they're typing cd into some directory, you're going to cd into the first directory, execute their command, and store what the new resulting directory is. And it actually changes very little to your code to actually do something like that. And I had worked through tons of different iterations of this, trying to figure out how to get it to work. And when I thought of that, I'm like, because I was trying to do it on the client side, have it maintain state and all different scenarios, and just coming up with a lot of issues. When I decided to do it on the server side and have the server just maintain state locally there, so this client is still just as dumb. The client just knows how to execute a command. That's all it is. The server now is the more intelligent one that knows what the last directory was and all that, and issues the command. A couple of things that's beneficial from is that the client now gets to maintain a smaller footprint, less code base, stuff like that, easier to maintain, easier to change on the road if you need to change a signature or something. But it keeps more of the functionality in the server and less in the client. You may have a scenario where that isn't ideal, but for this scenario and for this demonstration, it worked very well for us. I'll go ahead and jump in, show those last two demos, and we'll be getting fairly close, I think. So, okay, hold on just a second. Exit out. So, it's okay. Let's CD. Down again. Let's go ahead and jump all the way to 7. So we'll go ahead and look at, in the server side, when we were doing the file push, and I keep doing that, let's jump down to the execute for file push, or file pull, I should say. The server, at this point we have a bunch of commands in there. We skipped over a step in there as well when we did the paradigm shift, saying that we wanted to go into more of a server and various agents out there that we want to control. We need to maintain a list of those agents out there so we can interact with them individually or as a group. So we built this concept of neighbors, or whatever you want to call it. So we added a bunch of commands in there, which resulted in us needing a little help menu. So at this point we have help, list, exec, push, pull, and shell. List just gives you the output of how many agents you have out there, so you can interact with them, 0, 1, whichever one it is. The other commands, push, pull, exec, web shell, or remote shell, you can specify the agent number and it will issue the command just to it, or if you issue a -1 to it, it sends it to all of them. It does a mass broadcast out if you want to have them all do something. So, but the pull command is, so we showed push before, but for pull, it's just a matter of sending the pull command to the client. The server is relatively dumb on this part. It doesn't really know what's going on. So the server, turns out in that scenario, didn't have to do very much, but we pushed some of the code to the client for the pull. When you do pull, we're basically replicating on the client what we did on the server for push, which is he goes in, it reads in the file, and sends it back. It's very simple, straightforward. We already had the code in one place. We just reversed the order. So now you're just telling it to send it back to you. Nothing big there. Go back to the server again, if I can find the right one. And then we have shell. One of the things that shell does, if I jump back up to the shell code, remote shell here, is, so the remote shell. Well, I have a display prompt in there just so you can see a prompt, so you can see the difference between output of commands and what have you. First thing it does is it displays, it grabs whatever the current working directory is. It's set to 0 at the moment, but then it executes it, and so it has it coming out. It'll grab it in a moment. Every iteration through a while loop, it just sends out whatever the prompt is up there. Exit to quit, and the current working directory, so you can see where you're at. I guess I should grab this. Sorry. And then it comes through standard style loop as we saw before with the server, just going into a loop sort of a loop, just reading in. As long as there's stuff to read in, if it's something on standard in, we take it. If it's exit, we just quit out of the remote shell. Otherwise, we there. Otherwise, we come down and we decide what our message is. Our message is now CD into whatever current working directory is, semicolon, the message that we want to send, and then we append semicolon PWD to it. So that's that sort of construct that we say. You're always CDing into a directory, executing command, and getting whatever the new working directory is. The way we get the output back is anything that's sent back comes into this else if block down here, and we're just doing it that the PWD line, the result of that is always going to be the last line of the output. So we pull that off, store that as CWD, and then everything else is just the result. Fairly straightforward, fairly concise for the most part. I'm sure there's a lot of cleanup and a lot of tidying that could make that even prettier and more functional or more concise. It is functional, it works for our needs and in our testing, and a lot of this code isn't in this format, but this was the basis for what we did with our actual command and control we wrote called Legion. But this is the fundamental core of what we wrote for that, and then we went through and did a lot of other work with it as well. So let's go ahead and see a demo here for the remote shell and what have you. So let's go ahead and where is the server, client? Oh, and there should be another one over there. All right, let's go ahead and kill that. And I'll just go ahead and close those out. But this is the one I want. So you can see there, I have two different clients connected. If I type list, you can see I have two agents, 0 and 1. Okay, I want to interact with one of those. I type exec 0 ls. I get the result from that one. They're both running in the same directory right now, so the output would look identical. But at this point, you could also type shell. Well, I'll go ahead and demonstrate why I needed to do that. So I do exec 0 cd ... exec 0 ls. It's the same output. It doesn't maintain state by default. So if we do shell 0, okay, now we're in there. We're in a remote shell with a remote system. We type ls. We do cd ... type ls. It maintains state. It cd's down to the right directory. You can go wherever you want. You can, let's go back into 01 chat. Do ls there, where you can cat files. In this remote shell, in this style of format here, or this style of remote shell command execution, you can do pretty much anything you could that is not interactive. If you wanted to do something like VI, yeah, you're going to have to find a different solution for that. Remote desktop, something like that. But for anything that you can run and just get an output from, it's not sitting there waiting for you to do something, this will work absolutely fine, which is 90% or not, well over 90% of most of what I do in the engagement. I tend to script everything up anyway. I don't wait for interaction. If you want to edit a file, you can always use sed or something like that. Or you can just pull the file back to you, edit it, push it back up, execute it, whatever you want to. So this was one of the biggest things that took me the longest to figure out how to do, was to do the remote shell. But this is also then went on to be in parts of other code, just various versions of it, written it up in ASP and Java and what have you else. But the thing is, it took us a while. I would say there was a lot of other coding going on, other aspects of it, which we'll talk about in future things you could do to this code if you wanted to run with this. But it took us over, I don't know, a couple months of just spare time, afternoons, evenings, wife is asleep, sit there and code a little bit, stuff like that. If you were dedicated to this, you could probably write all of this in a matter of a couple of days if you really was just sat down, did nothing else. Or if you're even better than me, you could write it in a matter of hours, I guess, or less. But so this is where we're at right now with this code. So let's jump back over. I'll also include I'll send out a link after a while as well from my Twitter as far as to the link where the GitHub where this code will be up there at, as well as the more full-featured, more final product of Legion. You can get to it as well. You'll see remnants of this code in there, such as the remote shell. You'll see something reminiscent of that, and all these features will be in there if you wanted to look at that. It, too, is not written as a complete, like, this is the most badass command and control out there ever, but it's functional. It's something you can control inherently, and it's a good base to build off of. You can easily add extra features to it, whatever you want to. It has stuff like port scanners and stuff like that built into it, which this code doesn't, but this is help illustrating how you can get to that point if you wanted to write something yourself. So one of the things that we were, at this point, you have a base. You have the absolute bare minimum utilitarian command and control if you wanted it. What could you do from this point? You could do whatever you wanted. You could add extra commands in there, like I said, a screenshot or port map or, I don't know, wget, something like that. You could build something like that in. Do alternate communication paths. You could do like ICMP or
Yeah, DNS.
DNS, stuff like that, whatever you felt that was necessary for your environment. We went down the route with this of just straight TCP sockets because it worked for the demonstration that we were going for, and in most scenarios that'll actually work. Now, the next thing down there is one thing that would help in scenarios where straight TCP communication from point to point isn't going to work. That would be in the scenario where you have multiple home networks or multiple networks with multiple home systems. We'd like to see somebody or ourselves go in and add in like SOX proxies or pivoting functionality, so you can say, okay, that agent is sitting on 2 different networks at the same time. We want to tunnel through it to go ahead and do something else and communicate. That would be nice. It shouldn't be overly difficult to do. We just haven't sat down and done it with this code yet. Mesh networking. That's one that we do have a base functionality in on the more complete project of Legion. Whenever you go out, you can deploy an agent and point it back to the server. That's fine. Or you can just start deploying agents without any server associated with them. What they do is they then do a multicast, find other ones like themselves on their multicast network. If they find any, they link up and form a network. Then at any given point of any one of those can find a server. Now the server can contact all of those. It has a sort of pivoting involved, but not really. It's just more just message forwarding going through to each individual node. But that's a great concept that I don't see a lot of people using. It's more of just you go through and you just pepper a bunch of agents down across the network, and then they start communicating amongst themselves. And at some point in the future, you set up a server, have one of them connect into you, one of them is beaconing out or something like that, not all of them, just one. And if it can get out to you, then you have access to everything it can, all the other agents. That's something that isn't that overly difficult either. It took a little bit of a thought process in there. It's a little more complex than the rest of this, but it's something that you could take this code and build it into something like that easy enough. We did it. Lots of other directions you can take this, or you can just keep something like this, bare minimum, and run with it. But as I've been going through this, the talk has been sort of around doing a C2, something like that. But at the same time, I've been going through and also hoping people can understand that you can write something that is fairly functional, fairly utilitarian, but you don't have to write it all at once. Trying to write something that does all of it at once can be a little stressful, can be a little daunting, especially if you're not new to programming, stuff like that. But if you start something with something simple, like say a chat program, then add a feature to it, add another feature to that, and keep going. Eventually, you can get to something that is way more complex than anything that you could have written just sitting down one day and just say, I want to write this. So if you take that approach with whether it's writing a C2 or writing your own, I don't know, some other program out there you want to do, a web server or a phishing program or whatever, just start with something small and keep adding to it and testing each step along the way to ensure that it still works. And you'll get to something bigger and more complex and more functional without the stress of having to worry about writing it all from scratch the first time. I've been doing programming for many years, and I've done both ways. And it's if you have the time, start small and start building the project up. You'll end up saving time over the long run anyway, probably.
Yeah, because under the hood, this is still just a chat program, right?
Yeah, yeah. Ultimately, everything we've shown there is still just a chat program. You can still send messages back and forth and all that. Same basic functionality. You're just having a server with clients connecting in, and you're sending data back and forth. It's just we are adding extra features in those commands, certain keywords like exec or pull or push or something like that. So you just keep adding to it as you go along, and it's going to grow and grow. Now, are you going to take this code or even Legion and go out and like hack networks with it? Probably not. But it's there as an example or as a demonstration or as a kernel that you can build off of and do other things. So that's did a little bit of a quicker way through it by not jumping back and forth between the demos all the time, which was getting really frustrating for me. But thank you very much. You have my contact up there, my link, Twitter. Bill doesn't feel like, he doesn't believe in Twitter. He thinks it's imaginary. So if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, criticisms, banana puddings, I don't care. Just let me know. Bill, got anything?
I don't have anything else.
All right. Well, we appreciate your time coming out. Hope everybody who stuck around at least enjoyed it a little bit, might have had something to think about. So we appreciate it, and thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
So, not the absolute best presentation ever, but it served what we needed it to. So,
I've got an immediate question.
yes.
So when you got to the point where you were doing the reverse shell,
Yeah.
it looks like you kind of went out of your way to roll your own when there's a ton of stuff out there, like the hacker guides that are just like
Right.
Python code you can copy and pasta into the.
Right, and those tended to use lots of external libraries, which we didn't want to do.
Oh, okay, all right.
That's the biggest thing. We wanted to maintain the small, because, yes, we can then use PyInstaller and bundle it into one file, but that file goes from like 3 meg to like 15 meg.
Yeah, okay.
So that's the biggest thing. If we can, if the end result of a single binary that we can produce with PyInstaller is smaller, we tended to go that route with it. So,
yeah, a little bit of live off the
right,
line as much
and that
as
was the thing is,
possible. Again, if you
plus
go
it was
with
a,
sys,
plus as a
whatever.
programmer, I wanted to sit down and go, can I do that?
Of
Can I
course.
write one? And that was the most straightforward, simplistic way to do it. And none of the other ways I've seen out there still can handle VI.
I don't know anything.
Exactly. They all result with the same end result that I ended up with that short piece of code. So I don't see the need for those other ones. Granted, there might be some features in there that would do better. It might be less network communication, stuff like that. But ultimately, it ends up in about the same thing. And this one, not saying it's better, but it resulted in smaller code in the end. So,
okay, cool.
Yeah, that's the main reason. That's the main reason, honestly.
So with what you had there, it would only run on Linux, is that correct?
Right, but to run it on Windows, the only big difference is you change the PWD to just the CD command or echo %CD%. That will get you the
Then
current
you
working
also have an
directory.
identifier for the operating system. So
Yeah, you can do that. That's easy enough, yeah. Because in Legion, we actually do something like that. We send back what the OS is. We store that along with the socket and the port and all that.
So why didn't you use like SCP for the push and pull?
Because there's not always SCP there. We wanted it self-contained as much as possible with
Right,
minimal
because
external libraries.
I was going along your path. I was living off the land, but you know, SCP is almost. I guess you're right.
Almost not on Windows, it's not.
Right, but I wasn't looking at Windows because
Or
it's only
OS
running,
X.
because it's only running in Linux. So that's what I was.
Right. And you would switch out the semicolons with ampersand on Windows to get the same effect, and yeah.
It's just
There's minor cows.
Because like it seems to me every message is going to be sent with the same ID then.
Right. That's why I also said roll your own key distribution if you want. As far as the IB goes, you have to have the same IB for the client and the server.
Well, the ID, you're not sending out that to the same also.
No. That's what I'm saying. Roll your own. This is a demonstration showing that you the entire encryption part of it, you can replace that with whatever you want. You can send that out with the encryption if you want. We were just doing it just to show.
Video all good?
Oh, we might want to wait till.
Yeah, I was just looking at my watch. I got 10 till now, so there's still time.
Everybody being done so quick.
Do I need to get this mic up on the stand, or what's that?
Yeah. Well.
I didn't know how sensitive it was. Okay,
I'll put it up here.
Yeah, I'll do that. That'll be a little easier. Okay. Over there. I assume this belongs to you guys? It was left there when I walked in.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I got to keep track of those. Thanks.
There's still some seats here and there if anybody wants to sit. There's folks in the hall. There's some seats in the front 2 or 3 rows if you want to sit. What's that? That's why I'm speaking now, so I can stand up and kind of stretch for a while. Totally agree. For folks who are just coming in, there's still a handful of seats here and there near the front if you want to sit. Still a seat here. There was a gentleman holding his hand up. If you don't mind getting cozy with people. I don't think anyone bites, do they? I'm proud to say they're very security aware and security responsible. And I'll have these slides as well as some other notes and notes generally from the conference up at my GitHub page there. Unfortunately, somebody took GRID, G-R-I-D, before I could grab it, which was kind of a bummer. But going right into it, I'll go through some theory of the active defense. It's going to be down-to-earth stuff. I don't like the hand-wavy, really theoretical type stuff. I can and have done policy work, but I'm an in-the-weeds guy. I came up from security through the application side, so that's where my forte is. These will be practical things that you can do to cause annoyance, delays, and frustration to your attackers or your pen testers. There'll be a mix of items that you can do regardless of where you are in IT, whether you're a system admin, a DBA, a programmer, what have you. Most of it, as I said, since I came up through the application ranks, that's kind of where I tend to fall on the programming side. A lot of it will be .NET based, since that's where I spend most of my time, but you can generally take the principles and apply them to anything, whether you're doing Perl, Python, what have you, if it's web-based. And I'll leave some time at the end for some questions and comments. So going right in, what is it? Well, there's the wiki entry if you want to look it up. But basically, anything that you do that makes an attacker's life harder. Active defense assumes you will be attacked. Usually involves deception and misdirection, things like that. Doing it well requires you to get into the head of an attacker. So those of you, if I get a show of hands, who are red teamers, any red teamers here? Yeah, a few blue teamers? Okay, just run-of-the-mill programmers, IT, anybody in the audience? That? Okay, yeah. So kind kind of getting into the head of the attacker will help you do active defense more effectively, I feel. It borrows from the military. We all know that your web applications, whenever you throw it online, they're going to be under attack. You know, you can look through your logs and see ridiculous numbers of entries about stuff that's targeted, or you can tell it's just run by script kiddies. For instance, you know, if you've got a IIS site stood up and people are throwing up PHP stuff, looking for PHP my admin, I see a lot of heads nodding. It's just noise in your logs. So, you know, there's crap tons of attacks going on all the time. We all know that. So should you attack the attacker? Well, listen to Leo, absolutely not. The law, and I'm no attorney, I don't claim to be, but the law is pretty clear on that. If you attack back, then you're in the wrong. So I definitely don't advocate that. Certainly not in the US. You know, your mileage may vary if you're in Canada or somewhere else. But, you know, frustrating, deceiving the attack, next step, and put some deception into your applications. I'm not saying like start writing in spaghetti code and all that sort of stuff, but just little bits of things here and there to drag the attacker off his path. So the theory of it, to mount a successful attack, and those of you who are red teamers know, you need info, as much of it as you can get, because you're coming in cold to something. You don't know what it is. You may have a general idea based on extensions, what language it is, or what platform it's running on, but you don't know what you don't know. So you got to look around, and this is definitely kind of a self-answering question. What if you get false info? Starts leading you down the wrong path. Attack tools. Anything written out there, the Metasploit framework, Barbecue SQL, SQL Map, all those things, they're written just like regular software. They assume certain database coding and platform standards. What happens if you don't follow the standards? Now, like I said, I'm not advocating writing spaghetti code, but if you do a few little things, that's enough to start dragging someone, an attacker, off the path, and that gives you the advantage, because the more false info you can feed to them, the less reliable it's going to be for them going down the way as they start scanning, enumerating, and that sort of thing. Many tools use a fingerprint database to identify targets. Nmap's got a massive amount of OS fingerprints for practically any device out there. So, you know, keep that in mind when you're thinking about active defense. Predictable resource names and locations. Bad guys love these. They always hunt for that sort of thing. Derb has a Derb or Derbuster, or those kind of tools. They have huge word lists of common things that, regardless of platform, they may find in IIS, the LAMP stack, anything like that. So don't be predictable. Change your defaults. Block traffic from unfriendly IP net blocks. Like I said up there, some I know have coworkers in some businesses who just simply blacklist the entire net blocks of Russia, China, North Korea, any place that they're not doing business. I mean, I hate to single out countries, but if you see a lot of bad traffic coming from particular net blocks, you know, what else can you do other than just kind of sinkhole it or black hole it, firewall it off? That might work depending on your business rules and where you do business. If you're just a local concern, maybe just dealing in one region of the country, or just the US, Canada, for instance, blacklisting, you know, entire net blocks might work for you. But some things for the system server admins and DBAs in the audience, using IIS, just configure it to return the same error page on all status codes. That will at least slow someone down. But sift your web server logs. There's going to be stuff in there that people will just bang on and bang on and bang on. And if you throw that stuff out in your web root, that'll at least cause their tools to hit on it. They'll at least have to look at it. I mean, you would be silly not to overlook something that your tool returned a positive result on, which will at least slow down the attacker. This third bullet point, I've just started using where I work, and thankfully we haven't had any hits on it yet, but put some watermark or canary data in your in some of your tables. You know, real looking stuff that you can at least get a heads up on